It's close.
It is.
It's very close.
Legally, it
Kind
is
of turning
actually,
himself
right?
in, I think.
If the clock in the room is, even if it's late or
The
fast.
official clock.
We give it 5 seconds. I think we're live. We live? I think we're live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's now 7 PM on Tuesday, July 25th. It's time to call this meeting to order for the Chelmsford Conservation Commission. My name is Carl Bischoff. I'm the chair of the Conservation Commission. This meeting is being broadcast and recorded by Chelmsford Telemedia and will be available on their website. So, we have a good agenda tonight, and we have an open session citizen concern on the number 1 on our list. Are we good to go on that?
Are you Kenneth?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so, looks like you're up.
So Ken, hi Ken, how are you? So this is 4 Melody Lane right off of Stedman Street.
Hi. The reason I'm
Just give your name
my
and
name
address.
is
Yep.
Ken Dews, D-E-W-S, 4 Melody Lane. The reason I'm here is that I heard that my activities across the street from my house, which is conservation land, had become of some concern to the Conservation Commission. And it is conservation land. I thought I would come in and just explain what's going on. When I moved into my house about 30 years ago, it was private property across the street from me. There's a large wetland area there. It's broken into, I think, 2 lots, and then conservation already owned a section further down. But it's basically all wetland with a border of about 30 or 40 feet of land that's dry, comes up to Melody Lane. And it was owned, and the people who owned it had wanted to build on it several times. We noticed it being demarcated and flagged, but because it was so close to the wetlands, I think, they were never able to get a permit to build on it, and it became pretty much neglected property, or just left alone. Over the years, the neighborhood, folks from the neighborhood had taken to bringing down all their leaves and yard waste and putting it there because it was level and easily accessible. And there was actually a pond just off the road that is slowly filled in. I'm told that once there was ice skating there. It is eutrophied now and is not very large anymore, but it was being filled in with leaves and debris. And as a environmentalist and a former Concom member, not in this town, that bothered me. So I actually built a little barrier across the trail through the trees that was being used for people to ferry stuff down. Just because I didn't want to have a confrontation with anyone, but at the same time, I knew it was private property, and it was just, I didn't like seeing it. So I did that, just a simple, and that dissuaded folks from going and actually dumping stuff into the water. Instead, they just left it in the, on the ground, on the level area before that. Okay, so that piece of property, I think was taken by the town for tax default. I don't know for sure. And then turned over to conservation, which makes sense.
Ken, this is one of the pieces across the street?
Across the street from me, right. There's 2 lots, and then there's a easement, a drainage easement, I believe, or a gas easement or something there. So a few years after I bought my house, I bought a tractor, a little Kubota tractor. And I started taking that pile of debris that was there and turning it over on a regular basis and making it into compost. And then whoever wanted it, primarily me, took it out at the end of, once it, with compost, as you know, if you just pile leaves and debris, it'll build up and build up and build up and take an awful long time to break down. But if you turn it over and aerate it a couple of times, it makes all the difference in the world. The problem is the stuff is incredibly heavy, so it's hard to make compost. But with a little tractor even, I could just flip it over. Within a few weeks, it'd break down to good usable compost, and then and so that's really what's been going on there. I bought a bigger tractor a number of years after that, and more people have been bringing stuff down, but only folks from the immediate neighborhood. And it's leaves and sometimes grass, and some branches and stuff too, but little branches and stuff. And people have asked me, is it okay to put our stuff here? And what I've said is, if you put it in this pile that I've got, I will turn it into compost, and you can have the compost if you want to bring it to you. But it's not my property, and this could change at any time, so, that's the caveat. And so that's what's been going on back there, or across the street from me. I haven't had to take down any trees or anything in order to sort of make enough area for a couple of piles of various stages of compost. And because I'm right there and I turn it frequently, it never smells or gets fermented or anything.
Oh,
like
excuse
that.
me, can you hear me? The room's on mute. No, none of the participants via Zoom can hear anything in the room.
Thank you.
I don't think that's anything I have control of.
Chelmsford Telemedia, can they help us out? Are you out there at Chelmsford Telemedia?
That's my boy.
It's working now, thank you. All set, thank you.
Thanks.
That's my son, actually.
He knew what he was doing. No.
He knew enough not. Anyways, so that's what's been going on. In addition to turning over the compost, and I clear it out every year, so it's just bare dirt. I've been able to eliminate all of the bittersweet because all the trees were festooned with bittersweet, which I cannot stand the sight of. So I've been battling that, and I've gotten rid of all of that. There was an enormous amount of garlic mustard growing there too. And I've gotten rid of all of that just by manually pulling it. It's right there. There was a big area of blackberries that have come back. They were getting smothered by the bittersweet. So there's blackberries, and actually in the wetlands, probably none of you have ever waded out there, but there's a tremendous blueberry crop, and it's actually a quaking bog. If you walk out, it has the whole really nice bogging or bouncing. So, and one other thing that's interesting is that no matter how much rain we get, the level there never changes. It's doing its job as a wetland in terms of absorbing an enormous amount of water all spring long. It just stays the same, so I don't have to worry about flooding. So, does anybody have any questions or? Yes.
You're outside of the wetlands itself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah. There's
There's
trees and
about a
brush.
30 or 40 foot
Yeah.
in from the road before the wetlands
What I'm doing
start,
is
right.
just off the road, there's a mound. The people who owned the property, I guess, brought in a lot of fill and just mounded it up in like a, and there's some junk in there. It's not the cleanest of fill, but it's, but that keeps any runoff from going directly into the.
Has it got so popular that people are coming in there from other parts of
No,
town?
no.
So it's just your neighborhood?
It's just yeah, and I'm the only guy on the street, only adult male on the street, so I'm the one who's primarily.
So Carl, what's the issue?
So are you coming here to share what's going on?
I wanted to let you folks know because I heard that some people were concerned that what I was doing was dumping, and that's certainly not the case. I would not. I'm more sort of trying to protect that area. I think it's a resource that at some point could be opened up with a boardwalk or something, but, it really is an amazing birds. I'm a birder, so I feel privileged to live across the street from that really nice wetland. Yeah.
Hi, Ken. I was interested in your invasive management conversation and the blackberries and all that. Not your issue, but do you have any idea when that fill was put in, ballpark?
Well, I'd have to say more than 30 years ago.
So a long time ago.
Yeah, I think, the people who owned it were going to build, and they started the process of bringing in fill that they were going to just push and move the wetlands back, and were stopped somewhere in the permitting process, I assume. And it never went beyond that. So there's, as I say, it's mounded up, but there are good-sized trees growing everywhere now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of Norway maple in there, but where isn't there a lot of Norway maple? But there's also some beautiful oak trees And as I say, fabulous blueberries, and
Yeah. And you were pulling the bittersweet
I just,
manually, huh?
I just pull it out, yeah. You know, once you get on top of it, you just have to go through once or twice a year and do it, pull it manually again, and
So-
no poison ivy, but I know that's not a non-native, but there isn't any in there to speak of.
So I don't think we need to take any action here. I think it's good to
Yeah.
know this information. I think it sounds like actually we have a steward of the property.
But
In a
I think we have to.
You think we do?
Yeah. What I would like to suggest is so long as the individual is creating compost, that we allow it, but not to let it get any, is there an opportunity to make it significantly bigger, or is that pretty much the size?
No, I mean, I could,
'Cause I'd like to limit the size.
oh, yeah,
And the compost is a great idea, because some of us, I certainly, one of us, there are others, we talked a long time about asking the town to create a town compost site. What I don't want is this to get known, as, that's why I asked you how many people.
fortunately, most of what I said, including my address, wasn't recorded, I
Yeah.
guess.
No one's parking there.
Nobody can come down, there's only two to three houses on the road.
Dead end or a cul-de-sac? at the
It's a
end?
cul-de-sac.
There is a cul-de-sac.
And nobody comes down the street
I don't
without,
think anyone knows where Melody Lane is.
exactly, but it's a short enough, small enough street that nobody comes down there without somebody looking and saying, why is there a car coming down there? And we don't challenge people, but if anything anyone ever to pull up and do anything, there was a paver, who came and had a little leftover asphalt and did dump it there once, but.
There are
not-
two lots there that are owned by conservation, and there are two abutting lots that are also owned by conservation. So there's 4 lots in there.
Right.
And you all know where it is, and it's on the back end of the Chelmsford Water Department, and of course, we own, out on the Smith Street area, we own a lot of conservation land. And it's, I think it's, did we name that Smith Street Wildlife Refuge without a sign? I think we did,
It's Black Brook, right?
yeah. Black Brook grows through, so it's a great conservation area. I just think we need to make sure it doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's a
would-
good idea, but I don't want to get out of hand.
I wouldn't let it, but
No, I know you
any one of you should stop by anytime and.
So, do you have a motion, or how do you want to do this, Dave? What do you?
Does anybody else have any thoughts? If not, I'll make a motion.
Yeah, I got some thoughts. So Carl, I mean, I applaud Ken here for taking some initiative with the compost pile and taking initiative to help us control these, bittersweet and other invasives that we're fighting out there. So that's all good things. So I would certainly support Dave's idea of having us kind of ratify what's going on now, but keep the scope kind of the same. But yeah, I'm glad you came here and let us know, because, people come in all the time, kind of asking questions, hey, what's going on? And now we have information, so.
Yeah, well, I probably should have come much sooner, but I certainly won't let it expand because I don't have the capacity, and there's no room to put any.
I'll give you a motion when you're ready.
Any other comments?
I agree with Dave. He's more of an asset than a liability down there. He's
Yeah.
taking care of it.
Yeah.
As long as we can limit.
Johnny, anything? No?
And,
No,
and,
no.
and as long as you don't fall through the bog, if there's a. if it is a
Well, I have
classic bog.
chest waders and I know exactly where to step. I'll tell you a story. When I first moved in, my neighbors were, I was up on my deck one time and I heard, help, help. And I said, come on, that's not somebody calling for help, and then I heard it again. And I went down and I went across the street and I said, somebody's out there yelling for help. And there's actually a stream that's a little more clear that flows on the Melody Lane side, and then it's real boggy beyond that. And there's a little kid from next door, I won't mention his name, he's not a little kid anymore, had somehow gotten over that stream and was in the wetlands, and everything was over his head. All the rushes and everything. He wasn't in any immediate danger, but he had no idea which way to go, so.
You got him out.
I saved him. And then his dad later on saved my
Sorry.
boy, so we're even.
David, do you have anything
Yeah,
else?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the creation and maintenance of a compost pile on our property on Melody Lane to be maintained by Mr. Ken Drews, Drews, rather, on Melody Lane.
Second.
Okay, motion by Dave, seconded by Bill. Any more comment? No more comment? All in favor?
Yeah, can you send us a photo of any cool birds?
I have, I said, yeah, I do. I put them online, or I put them on, yeah, I have the birds.
Yeah,
Indigo bunting the other day,
nice.
and
It's Carl's Chelmsford Bird Challenge, right?
there's
All in
a,
favor?
All right.
Opposed? Nope, unanimous?
actually, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ken, thanks very much.
There's at least one family of barred owls living over there, and I can call them in. I can imitate them perfectly. So the other day I called them in, and one was flying over our yard, and a Cooper's hawk came down and attacked it viciously and pulled out a big puff of feathers and stuff. And Peter, my son, who's an excellent photographer, was able to take a camera and go bang, click, 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 and got pictures of it, of the two of them, like right over our heads.
Wow, cool.
You want to pull out bittersweet on any other parcels?
I do. I mean, I'm on the land trust.
He's on the land trust, so.
When I was moving to Chelmsford, before I moved here, I had a friend who was involved, and she said, "You got to come on the Chelmsford Land Trust." And I said, "Fine." I said, I'm a conservation commissioner. I was thinking that maybe I should go on the Concom. She said, "No, all they do is worry about Route 3, the Route 3 expansion."
That's
How long ago was that?
Yeah. So,
All right,
anyways,
thank you very much. Thanks, Ken. Okay. Do we have any other public input, this being a open session for citizen concern? Nothing, okay, not on the agenda, okay, nothing on the Zoom, I presume, Dave? Okay, so next on the agenda is the request for amended order of conditions, 129-0931. This is continued from our last meeting on July 11th. This is 270 Billerica Road, and Casey Ferreira. Hello, Casey, hello again.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
David, I don't know if you did get the updated
I
presentation
did,
plan.
yes, I haven't had a chance to. Let me try to.
I also have it on this thumb drive if that's easier for you, but.
I think I can open it up.
So, again, Casey Ferrer with Howard Stein Hudson. The only update to this presentation plan that you're going to see from the last time is I just added the location of the monitoring wells as they were installed. I do have Ed Weigel here with me from RU. This is the LSP for the site to answer any questions related to the reporting. The project attorney, Doug Deshane, is actually not here right now. He had another meeting, but he should be hopping on Zoom once he is available. So I don't really have any new information to present to you, as most of our findings, or what we were set off to find, was related to LSP information. So we're more than happy to field any questions related to that. I'm more than happy to field any questions that you may have rooted from last meeting. But yeah, I'd like to open it up to whatever questions you might have.
Well, start down at this end. Peter, you want to start off with a question or two?
Yeah, hi, thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
Well, I have some pretty basic questions,
Sure.
so Ed, I'm glad you're here because I know enough about LSP services to be dangerous, but I don't know all the details like you do, Ed. So my first question is, to my way of thinking, this project has changed tremendously with the discovery of PFAS. And my question is, how in your plans, and can you show me in the plans how the project will ensure there's no increase in PFAS releases to the wetlands? And that's really a two-part question. The first part, which I'll defer to David Coons on this, maybe we're past this, but the first question is, with the existing stormwater system, you've got PFAS well known to be present in things like truck hydraulic leaks and whatnot, and this is a warehouse, and I realize that somebody determined this is not the so-called LUPL situation, which I personally don't understand that, because we are adding a potential source of pollutants. And now with PFAS being a big issue for everybody, you've got that in all the hydraulic fluids and whatnot from trucks. But putting that aside, my question is, given that this is now kind of being viewed as a PFAS site, or potentially, whatever the right words are, how are you guys ensuring that we're not spreading it around and it's soil or groundwater? And of course, there's two parts to that question. Obviously, dust releases and whatnot, but our jurisdiction is more the groundwater and the wetlands. So how are you going to keep the stuff out of the wetlands?
Well, so I guess to answer one of the parts of the questions related to the groundwater.
Sorry, there were so many there.
We don't have any proposal to impact or penetrate groundwater or intercept groundwater at any point. We have all of our required pre-treatment and treatments ahead of any water that we plan to discharge to the groundwater. We do have the focal point that does penetrate the groundwater by an inch or so, but that's fully wrapped in a 30 mil plastic impermeable fabric. So there's really no interception of groundwater in that location either.
Right, and I think that's a long conversation that we don't have time for today, but what about during construction? And there's a related question. I think we've asked before how you determine seasonal high water table.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a particularly good question now.
Well, seasonal
With all the
high,
rain.
I went out and I tested. We dug 10-foot deep hole test pits, and we looked for redoxamorphic features and actual, I believe on this side, the groundwater was actually to its level because it was May,
Yeah.
high water season, and it's on the low side of the site. I do recall once the pits were open, water was weeping in, and then they leveled
Right.
off at a certain elevation.
But you didn't do enough test wells, did you? Or do you know enough about the groundwater gradient? Are you confident your construction guys aren't going to need to pump groundwater, either groundwater or stormwater that's come in during a rainstorm? And what are you going to do
Well,
with
so
that
there's
water?
two different sections to that as well, right? So groundwater, the confidence level is there that we're not going to hit groundwater because as you move across the site, it goes down. As we move across the site, we're going up.
Yeah.
So, and then with water that moves through, if it rains and it stops raining and they go out to build, there could be still stormwater that's going to be moving through the soil. And if it's too wet and they have to de-water, they're likely not going to be out there building anyway. But if it dries enough, I mean, that soil is very sandy. That water is going to fly through and it shouldn't hold up anywhere. So I would say it's a minimal chance that they're going to be hitting any kind of water that would stop them in their tracks.
So I would suggest to you and the commission that we look at it this way, either a permit limit of no groundwater pumping during construction, or you guys come back with a plan for how you're gonna handle what is probably PFAS and there's other contaminants on that
A
site.
dewatering plan that
Yeah,
would address
what are you gonna
all
do with it?
those
Because you
issues.
can't just,
Right.
you can't just put a filter sock on it because it doesn't capture this stuff. So that's my first concern, is how you handle that. The second, though, is bigger. This commission feels that we should or would like to see a soil management plan for the PFAS, and this gets into Ed's expertise. But, there's requirements in the state has waste regs, things like you can develop a contaminated site, yeah, but you can't commingle clean soil with contaminated soil. Our commission's concern, because, we're not here to enforce the MCP, but our concern is runoff from a dirt pile or dust emissions. And obviously dust emissions off-site impacting people nearby isn't really our purview, but dust that deposits on the surface and then washes into the wetlands would create an increased pollutant load, or potentially. So you have a soil management plan, or you're working on one. Can you share that with the commission?
I'd like to let Ed answer a part of that question, but first, as part of construction, we do have to follow a stormwater pollution prevention plan, regardless of contaminated site or non-contaminated site. And that stormwater pollution prevention plan addresses dust levels and controlling of dust through the watering on the site, and also soil stockpile areas to be
Right.
contained away from the wetlands, surrounded with erosion control barriers. But I will let Ed come up here and talk about the soil management plan if
Yeah,
that's
and I'm particularly interested in the MCP requirement. Ed, I've forgotten the name of it, but you can't commingle soil. And how are you gonna do that? How are you gonna achieve that? Yeah.
Sure. My name's Ed Weigel. I'm a licensed site professional with Rue Associates, and Rue has been retained by the new owner here to help them out with the contamination that we detected at the site. So basically, it's a contaminated site, and that's why we developed a soil management plan for the owner, so that when the owner is undertaking these redevelopment activities, they are aware that there are issues on the site that need to be appropriately managed while they're doing the earthwork. The soil management plan sort of lays out where we've identified contaminated soil. And under the MCP, contaminated soil is soil that exceeds a regulatory release threshold.
Right.
The other thing you mentioned was the anti-degradation provisions of the MCP, which says you can't take soil that's impacted and bring it to a location where it's not impacted. Typically, anti-degradation provisions deal with when you're moving soil between sites. At this project, the soil management plan that we wrote for the owner has them keeping all their soil on the site and not taking it anywhere else unless they find out they have excess soil, in which case we've specified licensed disposal facilities which to take that soil.
Excuse me, isn't that very likely?
No, it's not. And the reason why...
They're lowering the floor limit, right? So that, isn't that digging up more soil?
It's
So the site is still a fill site. It's just not as much of a fill site as it was before. So we don't propose, there are cuts and balances on the site, but it'll be soil that can move from one portion of the site to another portion of the site. There's no proposal to have any excess cut.
So Ed, excuse me, the PFAS in soil, was that above or below the water table?
It was at the water table.
Right at. Oh, that makes sense, doesn't it, technically?
Yeah, because we feel that the PFAS is coming onto our property from upgradient sources. Right across the street is 3M, a known manufacturer of PFAS, and they're also listed in the ECHO database as a potential PFAS source. Next to 3M is a property that was formerly occupied by a company called Electrometals, and they did metal finishing, which is another industry that has PFAS-related issues. So we've put in a bunch of test wells. We put them in across the upgrading property line. We see the PFAS coming across the street, and we also see it leaving our property at more or less the same concentrations and heading into the wetlands behind the property out towards Route 3.
Right, so did you do the due diligence before the property acquisition? In other words, this commission has had some conversation, or a few of us, is here's a site that was filled at some point in the past, 30, 40, 50 years ago, I don't know when. And it's right across the street from a known PFAS source, the 3M plant, although I don't know how long they've been making it there.
Suspected.
Thank you. That's why we need your expertise. Keep guys like me out of trouble. And it's next door to another facility. How do we know that the site your client owns doesn't have contaminated fill from these past manufacturing operations that surround it when it was filled in the 50s or 60s? You have any indication that, I mean, that's a good answer that you found contaminated soil at the water level, but how do we know the whole site isn't full of contaminated fill? And now that we're going to dig it up, it's going to go into the groundwater and the wetland.
So we've done, as part of our due diligence for the property owner, we did a number of soil tests, and the only place that we found soil contaminated with PFAS, that is exceeding a regulatory threshold, is on the upgrading property line. All the other places where we looked...
So where is that? Is that on Boston, is that on Bill Ricker Road?
That's on Bill Ricker Road. it's this well. Is where we found the soil issue.
So you sampled the soil when you installed the well, in other words?
Correct.
Well, but it says existing monitoring well.
No, it's still there.
Well, so what's the difference between existing and new?
We labeled the ones that were also there.
Well, you wouldn't have sampled an existing well, because we weren't looking for
Yeah.
PFAS years ago.
It might be the one that's to the left.
Yeah, it could be to the left.
Oh, well,
There's a bunch of wells all the way across the front, and I apologize, this is not my figure, so.
no, maybe we're just mixed up on where we are, because there are a bunch of new ones.
This one maybe, that says it's a newly installed well?
Yeah, it could be that one. I recall it being to the other side.
Well, that's all right.
Over on this side.
Yeah.
There's another one.
But how much soil sampling have you guys done?
We've done enough sampling in order to meet our due diligence requirements and to, we believe, meet DEP's requirements to demonstrate that we're not the source property.
Right, but I'm thinking more of the construction
irrelevant.
dust and soil management. I mean, so what you're saying is there is no plan to segregate contaminated soil within this 6 or 7 acre site to avoid cross-contamination that you might or might not, or somebody might have to clean up later. Would that be fair to say?
No, I don't think so. Based on the construction plans that have been given to us, there's currently no plan to perform excavation in areas where contaminated soil has been detected.
Okay, and I might suggest to the commission, I would be comfortable to see some of that data.
Okay.
I think, David, you've asked for some of this,
Yes.
just to be sure we're not running into a situation where it's gonna end up, I mean, our job is to protect the groundwater, right? And so we need that assurance. I'm sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time.
Why don't we
I think
keep
that's,
going
I only have
around
one
for a
other
moment?
question, and it may come up
Can always
around
go
the
back
table.
to it.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Hey, Bill, what do you got?
How many wells are there altogether?
There's probably 7 or 8. I'm not exactly sure.
All
Along the front and along the back.
along the back?
And where are the existing monitoring wells?
Looks like there are only
They're
two.
the two right in front of the proposed building.
Those were,
Sorry, where? Right there.
so I believe the existing monitoring wells are referencing wells that had already been installed when my client started working on their due diligence. And I believe the wells were installed as part of the investigation that the folks across the street were required to perform as part of their releases.
Did they have to do a cleanup across the street at some point?
So both properties are listed with Mass DEP, and they've both worked and performing assessment activities. The 3M property is listed as a site for solvents. The former Electrometals property is listed as a site for solvents and for buried materials.
I would think they're a bigger site than 3M.
Looking at the DEP files, it would appear from the perspective of the solvents that have been released. Yes, the former Electrometal site has a larger solvent plume. And as a matter of fact, the Electrometal site is still open. It's not closed with DEP yet. The 3M site is closed. They've achieved a regulatory outcome for their solvent issues.
When you actually do the work on the site work, is there somebody on site monitoring the things that we agreed to, or that you have outlined in your plan are followed? Who oversees that?
So if you're asking, am I going to be out on site watching them move?
Somebody, yeah.
So basically, the responsibility of complying with all the requirements it's in the hand of the owner. We can draw up plans and we can tell the owner, hey, this is what you need to do when you're out here doing the work, and if you do it according to our soil management plan, everything will be fine. But I mean, the reality is it's up to the owner and their site contractor and their site foreman to make sure that they're following the rules. Environmental professionals like myself don't watch soil, earthwork, extensive earthwork that's going to happen out here, for weeks on end. It's just not typical.
I mean, the
So it's only as good as the guy, your paperwork is only as good as the guy doing the work on the site.
That's the case in just about everything, isn't it?
The commission does have the legal authority to hire a consultant at the applicant's expense to monitor the work on the site. And my recommendation to the commission is that you seriously consider requiring that in the order of conditions.
That's good for now, Carl.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, if we could do a peer review with, or somebody, another consultation on the property.
Sure. As a matter of fact, Craig Ellis from Beta, are you there, Craig?
I am, yep. Hi, everybody.
So he is here as well, and certainly, the commission has any questions for him, certainly encourage members to ask him. Do you have any comments, Craig, on what's been said already?
Yeah, I guess one of my questions, I know you indicated that there's no soil that's going to be impacted or removed that's contaminated, but is any part of the construction activities going to be under the IRA at all, or is it going to be outside of contaminated areas?
We've performed our IRA, and we are planning to close our IRA and file a downgradient property status submittal within 2 weeks. And at that point, all the data and information that we've collected as part of our assessment will be publicly available.
And the other question I had is there, and you kind of talked about it briefly before, but from an infiltration perspective, I'm recommending that there's some sort of, I guess, statement, just whether or not any of the infiltration could exacerbate the groundwater conditions.
That's stormwater infiltration?
Yes, yeah.
Casey?
Well, he's asking if that would exacerbate the conditions.
Well, stormwater is presumed to be clean, so, it's going to clean up the groundwater as stormwater percolates in. I don't think it's going to make site conditions worse. I'm not sure how it would.
Well, if you've got PFAS coming off of oil from trucks, if you accept that scenario, that would make it worse, for example.
There's a lot of trucks going up and down 129 every day.
Right, but we're looking at the one site as going from an office park to a warehouse with trucks. So it's different, if you believe trucks leak more than cars and small trucks.
So let's keep going around here. Marky with Chris.
Good, Mark?
Yeah,
So, Mr. Chair, my concerns would be really around kind of monitoring. How do we ensure that the groundwater is not contaminated in the future? How do we, as a commission, what actions can we take tonight or at our future meeting to, again, have, the right amount of monitoring going forward so that, we got kind of some eyes out there as to what's happening, so that we don't get a surprise down the line where we find out that, groundwater's been further contaminated and impacting, drinking water and all that type of stuff, so.
So is it monitoring during construction or after everything's
Both,
done?
yeah,
or
both, monitoring during construction so that we ensure that there's no construction. We don't want to, we want to make sure that we limit the construction, right, so it's not touching that contaminated soil. We don't want to, move any of that contaminated soil into a situation where it's going to potentially contaminate the groundwater. So I think it's like, how do we do this from a monitoring situation? How do we have oversight so that we don't just issue a permit and then someday, year, 5 years, whatever down the line, we find out that, boy, this thing it's bad or worse, so.
And
You know,
so. Yeah,
One
go
thing I can just mention on that is that with the downgradient property status, once that gets accepted, that other party is going to have to be looking at this as well. And so they'll be doing some monitoring presumably.
Well, again, but we need to separate long-term monitoring from construction effects, because I think what Craig's referring to is long-term, right, Craig? The MCP
Correct,
program
yeah,
has. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say correct. Yeah, I was kind of alluding more to the long-term post-construction.
Yeah, and I'd be concerned about both. Got a short-term construction, we don't want to have things get worse through that, but then long-term, we're looking for the long game here, and
Right.
making sure the water's protected.
Right, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but we still don't have any information, this commission, on the extent of soil contamination and how much it's going to be disturbed during construction. So that, to me, is a huge question mark for this commission to think about.
Anything else,
Yeah,
Chris?
I'm good for now.
Okay, John?
Well, what Chris said, the future is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
This site, if it was filled, will we be having this conversation right now?
I think so, because it's in your jurisdiction.
Would the concerns be the same?
Would be the concerns be the same? That's how I'm trying to say it.
The concern here is that we're doing construction at a site that's being impacted by upgradient sites.
I have to disagree with that. The concern is that we're digging up a contaminated site, and for this commission, we don't care. I don't care where the contamination came from because we're looking at this site. Well, I mean, I do care,
Well,
but, you know, yeah, it's great to say we didn't do it, the guy across the street did it, but that doesn't change the fact that we're looking at a project that's gonna dig up
Peter,
contaminated site.
Peter, can you define what you mean when you say this is a contaminated site, please?
The soil has very high levels of PFAS. Let me
All of
finish.
the soil? Or
Well,
just the soil
that's the
that-
question I'm asking.
Okay, but be very clear when you describe the site as a contaminated site.
But that's his question. That's exactly his question,
In,
is we
in,
know
in
there's
the,
a
in,
sample.
in the environmental world, this is called a contaminated site.
Well,
Because,
then you'll have to educate me.
yeah, because the soil and the groundwater has pollutants bad for
When it's
people.
my turn, we'll get to some questions to that point.
Yeah, so we can talk about that, but it's really important. The fact that the guy next door did it doesn't change the potential for this site to impact our jurisdiction, the groundwater and the wetlands. Because it's, whatever's there is there. Where it came from is somebody else's issue.
Well, I think John's question alluded more to if we were to fill the site rather than the new proposal, which is to bring
Right.
it lower.
to lower it.
Right.
In either scenario, we don't have any proposal to intercept or dig into groundwater, so I believe to Peter's point, it's more the soil than the groundwater.
Correct.
I don't believe in either scenario there's less of a concern or more of a concern. I think this plan has the same disturbance that any other plan would have on the site.
But don't you have to dig deeper when you've got the building footprint 3 feet lower? That's your point, John, right?
You're digging deeper, but we're still not to the level of the groundwater.
No, I'm talking soil. I mean, let's
And
not
soil-
mix apples and oranges. I'm
Yeah, I
talking
mean,
soil.
you would have to dig deeper by the lowering of the footprint.
Right.
But where we have the extent of contamination being at the level of groundwater, I think we should be focusing on at the level of groundwater.
Okay.
Okay.
John, do you have anything more?
No,
Okay, Dave?
PFAS is a problem in Chelmsford. The magnitude of the problem I'm unaware of, but it is a problem, and the town is, and the water departments are faced with substantial investment to address the problem. I would think that this site is an opportunity to try to improve, not keep it from getting worse, but to actually improve the PFAS in the ground. I don't know how you do it, but we have an opportunity to do it, and I think we ought to be looking at that. When were these monitoring wells installed by, and I take it was 3M that installed them?
Yeah, the existing wells, we believe, were installed either by 3M or Electrometals.
And do you know what year?
The Electrometals problem was discovered in the late 1980s. The 3M started doing their investigation about 20 years ago.
Well, 20 to 35 years. And how frequently are the monitoring wells evaluated? Twice a year, once every 5 years? I have no,
The monitoring wells are sampled on a frequency that the LSP for the party performing the response actions feels is necessary to meet Mass DEP requirements. Typically in an area like this, which is classified as drinking water, as groundwater 1, typically you would sample wells on a quarterly basis if you were trying to close out a site, to be able to show that your contaminant concentrations through the year, on average, are less than the standard.
in the proposal, what's the anticipated flow of groundwater from Billerica Road to Route 3? Does anyone know?
Yes, so the Electrometal site and the 3M site have both done hydrologic evaluations and have developed groundwater contour plans, and those basically show groundwater flowing perpendicular to the road. We've done
Perpendicular to Bill Ricker Road and then straight out
straight
to the
to
Route
the-
3 and
to the
under
east.
Route 3
Yep.
to the water fields.
The groundwater contour plan that we did on 270 Bill Ricker Road shows the exact same hydrology, basically, from west to east.
Over this 30 to 35 odd years of monitoring wells, has the level of PFAS increased or decreased?
The wells installed by 3M and Electrometals have never been tested for PFAS.
So how did that come up?
The reason why it came up is because my client, who was looking to purchase the property, was doing due diligence. They hired us to help them with that due diligence. And we said, hey, 3M's across the street. They're listed in the ECHO database as being a PFAS source. So what, in addition to looking at the solvent issues that we know about, because the solvent issues also have the potential to impact construction and the management of construction, soil and groundwater.
Were they recently identified as a PFAS source, or have they been identified?
3M?
Yeah, they've been there a long time.
Yeah.
And when you look at their corporate profile for that location, they're described as a manufacturer, not a chemical producer.
They haven't been identified.
Okay, wait, slow down. We, meaning the country, everybody, only started measuring for PFAS, help me out here, Ed, a few years ago. So
Yeah,
these
but-
sites that were heavily evaluated, I think you said, Ed, your research showed 10, 20, 30
I'm
years ago.
trying to
Wouldn't have looked for it.
ascertain if we know whether the situation has deteriorated or gotten better over time.
Which
If the-
situation? The PFAS?
The PFAS.
We don't
And if-
know. There's no data.
There's no data at all.
Well,
So why are we
this was-
worried about it?
Well, this is a brand-new finding, that's why. On this site, if I understand it
Okay,
right.
is the PFAS finding at a serious level
Yes.
or at a
Yes.
minimal level?
the numbers that Ed's team reported in the groundwater well, and you're gonna have to help me out here, because I got mixed up with the decimal points, is way beyond the recent drinking water standards.
.098
It was
Eugene
the-
per liters.
Yeah, that
It's
was the
way
highest.
high, Dave.
That was the highest concentration, and the standard is 20.
And is anything being done about it now?
So,
Anybody?
yes, and let me describe what we're doing. So, basically, as a new owner to a property that's being impacted by, we believe, upgradient sources, under the MCP, under the Massachusetts statute, we are allowed to say, hey, listen, yeah, this is our problem, but the agency has carved out and provided some liability relief for parties that have been affected by upgradient sources. And the downgradient property status is one of those areas in the regulations that provides liability relief for
Has that
people who,
always been the case in the state regs?
for downgradient property status.
Yeah.
For about 25 years, we've had DPS.
All right, so it's more than 25 years ago when I had a problem and I was downgrading.
Did you have a good LSP who was able to?
Probably
You have a
couldn't, I couldn't spell it now and I couldn't spell it then. Is 3M participating at all in the improvement?
So when we file our downgradient property status report with the state, which basically says we think these guys did it, what the state will do, part of that DPS, part of the requirements of the DPS is we are required to identify who the property owners are immediately upgraded and downgradient of us. So we've identified the upgrading property owners, we've identified the downgrading property owners, and we're going to send everybody a letter as required by the state regulations saying, hey, we've identified these conditions and you should be aware of them and you might want to take a look at it. We anticipate that given the situation here in Chelmsford with the water supply and the PFAS that's been detected in it, we anticipate that DEP will immediately take a look at this report and send notices of responsibility to the two upgrading property owners who are very likely to be sources of this PFAS that we're detecting based on the types of operations that have occurred at those properties.
Can you determine if PFAS pollution, if that's the correct terminology, continues on the site or it's static on the site?
Well, it's in groundwater and it's migrating with groundwater.
Does that mean it flushes out unless it's replenished?
It is being replenished from some source up gradient, yes.
We don't know what that is.
Right,
It
because-
could be 3M, it could be the daycare center that used to be Electrometals,
Could be.
or there's probably buildings
Right.
behind, there is,
Yeah.
right?
There are other properties up there too.
So we don't know if more PFAS is coming on your site as every day goes by.
We can safely assume that PFAS is being transported through groundwater and migrating from the upgradient source properties across our property and exiting our property
Is
in
there
the
a way
downgradient.
for us to stop it migrating down off your property under Route 3 to the well fields?
Yes, and that is by letting the folks know who's responsible for the contamination, that they've got the issue, because right now, they don't know they've got the issue, so that they can follow.
You mean your client?
No, the 3M and
3M,
former
I'm
Electrometals.
sorry, okay,
Yes.
yep.
Yeah. So that they're made aware that this is an issue that they need to look at. You know,
Shouldn't that be
and
done-
they have the
Shouldn't that be
responsibility.
done independent of your project?
Should it be done independent of the project at 270?
Independent of what you guys want to do. Shouldn't somebody notify 3M you got a problem, you better look into it? I'm not asking you to, I'm sorry, I don't mean
Yeah.
to do that. But, I mean, I would think that
Yeah.
the problem's been identified.
Right.
So can I jump in here? I think, Ed, it's safe to say there's not a whole lot your client, you guys can do to stop within 270 Bill Ricker Road. There's really not much you can do to stop it. This PFAS stuff is highly mobile. It just spreads like crazy.
Well, one thing you can do is stop generating more on site,
Bingo.
right? At 3M,
Right.
or wherever.
Well, yes, but that's not really part of this project because.
I understand it. I'm talking about a
Yeah,
conservation issue.
that is the
Now,
solution.
having said that, a couple of other things. If this project were not a distribution center, but were a rehab of an existing office building, would we be having the same discussion? Okay.
Why not?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking. Because there are new stormwater management regs, you're right, even with a renovation, I would think. So I don't know but I don't know if this building were just a rehab, how much more work would have to be done.
Well,
This was found during property due diligence. Now, anybody acquiring a building, at least of this size, is going to get some kind of property due diligence done. And in doing so, upon the conveyance, the legal requirement to report it is why it has happened. So, no matter if anybody bought the property, I think this would have come up at any point. It doesn't
Right.
matter what they planned on doing
Right,
with it.
but I think Dave's asking a different question. If you were simply rehabbing the existing building and not digging up a contaminated site, we'd be having the stormwater part, because
Yes.
you'd have to upgrade the
And
stormwater system.
And we'd still have the monitoring well
Right.
issue.
Right.
I don't think it would really, again, our construction doesn't propose to go into any of the groundwater. We don't propose to move any of the fill off or any of the soil off-site. So I think our discussion is still related to what we found during the due diligence and the PFAS moving through the site. And that's still going to be the case whether we were just renovating the site or with new construction. I don't believe that changes what we're talking about.
Okay, I'll make one last point and then go on.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I can't support this project unless I see a conscious effort to improve the situation. And I won't define what improve means, because I don't know. I'll let some experts
So,
show me what improvement means.
I also just,
Because here's, as I said at the outset, it's an opportunity to, one, not let it get any worse, and possibly to make it better. You don't get those opportunities too often.
Yeah, if I may just kind of chime in on this. So the downgrading property status, once that gets filed, the DEP is more than likely going to issue the notice of responsibilities that are going to require others to kind of take a look at this and figure out how to improve it.
But that's gonna slow these guys down.
well, no, because that happens separately from our progress. So you alluded to earlier that somebody's got to tell them now that it's been made aware.
They probably have that now.
Well, that's the filing that's going to be taking place. So in filing for the downgradient property status, that's what triggers DEP to do something and to find the source. So I think what you were talking to earlier, somebody's got to tell 3M or somebody's got to do something. That's exactly what this project is doing. Without this project, this wouldn't have been
But that could be
found.
months down the road.
I don't know
It'll
the
be years.
timelines. I don't know the
It'll be
timelines of
years.
what happens, but
Just to be told.
Well, yeah, but it'll be years before the source is identified and removed,
Well, I'm not
most
talking
likely.
about that.
You can talk
I'm just
more
notifying 3M and whoever Electrometals is, or was, that there's a problem here. If I'm 3M, I want to know as soon as possible there's a problem that I might be liable for.
So let's try to,
That's up to you.
Mr. Kuntz, I was hoping you might have something you might want to add here. You
Sure.
I know you had some conversations with the engineer, with Casey, so.
Yes. So I would just like to reemphasize the point that's already been made, I think, a number of times, that even before the most recent contamination of, the PFAS contamination was discovered, this was a contaminated site. Over going back 35, 40 years, something like that. So, but I think some of the questions you've heard, Casey, and some of the concerns expressed kind of reflect the fact that, we have absolutely no idea what, even before the current PFAS release, what was the nature and extent of the prior contamination. And
on 270 site.
on 270.
Okay.
And I've asked you
Mhm.
to provide a detailed history of the contamination on the site, starting back from the beginning, providing all of the data that DEP has. So, I think we, and certainly in terms of trying to, talk about an improvement, I think we need a baseline. How bad was it?
Right.
Do we have any kind of maps showing, the hydrogeology on the site? The plumes of the solvents. I mean, it seems logical to assume if there were only, over the course of decades, only 2 existing monitoring wells, right up toward the boundary of the property. I mean, can that really provide a good indication of the entire site, where the contamination has collected or how it's been distributed?
But David, it must have been enough of a sort or of a type of pollution that warranted the monitoring wells,
Well, absolutely.
which was pre-PFAS.
Why weren't more monitoring wells? I mean, that's probably a rhetorical question.
Yes.
That probably can't be answered, but it just seems to me logical that
And they were looking for something, or they wouldn't have done it in the first place.
there should have been more existing monitoring wells, but, are they continuing to be sampled? Or has it been closed out?
Post our meeting yesterday, the first person I spoke to was Ed to ask him these questions, and I've actually asked him to be prepared to answer these questions today for you. So, if you would.
So for 3M, they had a solvent release that they identified about 20 years ago, and they closed that site about 10 years ago. So 3M hasn't looked at their wells since then, or at least if they have, they haven't reported it to DEP because they're not required to. The Electrometals site, they've been looking at wells since the late 80s, and they have a ton of wells. Many of the wells are actually on the property that is on the other side of the brook to the
New
northeast.
storage
Yes,
facility is?
yes. So, so their plume has gone way past, and, they're looking at it. But the Electrometal site, they're not done. One of the reasons why these sites linger is because it's in a groundwater resource area. It's drinking water. It's classified as drinking water. It's really hard to clean up drinking water, or at least to get contaminants out of drinking water down to the standards that are regulated by the state and the federal government. It's extremely difficult. We see this all across the state, especially with PFAS. I mean, people, communities, like yours are installing these point of entry systems on their wells before they even ship water out, to their customers and their citizens. You know, it's a substantial issue, and, you know, the state and the federal government, they're still trying to get their hands around it. If you go to DEP and you talk to any of the PFAS folks, you know, who are working on it, and there are a lot of people at DEP who are working on PFAS issues, you know, they don't really know what's going to happen with PFAS, how it's all going to be dealt with. The EPA has just proposed lowering the standard from 20 to basically what is the level of detection of the best technology that the analysts can provide. So, you know, so we're looking at, you know, molecules, and it's very concerning for anybody who's in any sort of real estate or water supply or, you know, dealing with manufacturing, because, I mean, let's face it, you know, there's PFAS in just about everything. It's in food products, it's in cosmetics, it's in people, you know, and it's in wastewater, and it's ubiquitous. So it's a serious issue. The science is far from settled, and it's something that the regulatory agencies at both the state and the federal level are working on diligently to address.
So I've heard of a lot of commentary, a lot of good questions. As I understand it, you've done a soil sampling on the site,
Yes.
and have you shared that with us?
That is going to be shared with you as soon as we submit to DEP. And we have a deadline coming up. So they're going to, so this report is going to go to DEP within the next week.
Within the next week, okay. And you have a soil management plan for the project?
Yes, we've prepared a soil management plan for the owner.
And can we get a copy of that?
I don't see any reason why the owner wouldn't want to provide it to you.
I see nodding. Okay,
Well, and we need that peer reviewed as well,
yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, we'd want to have them that would be Craig, David?
That'd be Craig, yes.
Yeah, okay. To have him review that, and to review the sampling as well, together.
Yes, and
Other
that-
information.
And that kind of leads to another question, so, I guess, sorry. Okay, let's get to the PFAS. So this well, it says newly installed monitoring well, right here, so you think that's where it was, the PFAS were discovered?
Yeah, it's going to be very obvious in our report, because all the wells are identified with call-out boxes, which shows what we detected in soil and what we detected in groundwater at each of the locations on a map depicting the entire property.
So all of these other newly installed wells, do you know, have they been sampled yet, or are they in the process of being sampled?
All the newly installed wells were installed by my company, and they've all been sampled for PFAS.
And
They all have PFAS in them.
okay, but the specifics you're submitting to DEP, and you will CC the commission on it.
Yes.
Just as an aside on this point, I think I should have been notified that monitoring wells are being installed that close to wetlands. Yeah, I think there is an exemption under the Wetlands Protection Act regulations for installing monitoring wells, but there may not be one under the Chelmsford Wetlands Protection Bylaw. So,
I believe there is.
oh, okay, well, I think I should have at least have been notified that that was happening, you know, out of courtesy, if nothing else.
Understood.
You know, I think another bit of information I think we need is, you know, just what in general are the concerns, what in general are the protocols, the guidelines for working on a contaminated site. I mean, I've certainly seen a number of times in the past, you know, the best of engineering analysis, the best of intentions with regard to construction. The work has gone into groundwater. And, you know, I think that's within the realm of possibility this time.
They're kind of close.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly within a few feet if you know, accidents can happen, you know, as I say, despite the best of intentions. So is there any place where it's in writing that we can find, you know, again, generally speaking, the concerns for working in a contaminated site, And what sort of, procedures should be followed? Is that something that either Craig or you can provide, direct me to?
Sure. Craig, you're probably familiar with the policy, construction in contaminated areas? Yeah, it's a well-established Mass DEP policy. We used it as guidance for our soil management plan. So, there is a guidance document that the agency has published.
Would you please forward that to me?
Sure, we can certainly provide it to you. It's a public document. It's on their website.
Dave, can I just add for the benefit of fellow commissioners, and you guys can comment or not, it doesn't matter. Contaminated sites are redeveloped all the time. I mean, it sounds awful, it sounds scary, it kind of is, but that's why there's all these policies you're referring to, David, is there are ways to do it carefully. And that's, I think, what this commission is interested in is, some assurance that we're following the rules. It is a little weird. I mean, a lot of developers will clean it up first, but in this site, they don't control the source, so they don't really have that option of closing out the site first. So it's, just needs to be done carefully, that's all. Right? Fair?
Craig, looks like you're trying to say something, Craig?
I was just going to say, to that point, it's really going to be about managing exposures of, for whatever areas they're digging and depths and that sort of thing. So, I'll certainly take a look at that when the plans come in.
Thank you.
I got a question. Is there any monitoring wells up Alpha Road at all with any data? I mean, there's been several purchases of land there.
On the other side of Tracy?
On the other side, behind
Where was Hittite?
3M.
Is that where Alpha Industries is? Not Alpha,
I
Analog
mean, is there any
Devices
other
now?
monitoring wells in that area west of 129?
There absolutely could be.
Because up Alpha Road is Analog Devices, which used to be Hittite, which was a semiconductor manufacturer.
Yeah, I mean, there's monitor wells
I
everywhere.
mean, the town of Chelmsford owns a building.
Would they be reported?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask.
So,
We could be a pollutant.
John, we should have that conversation offline, because I think we'll find there's monitoring wells everywhere.
Well, that's what I,
There's no
is there
central
monitoring
database.
wells and,
yeah, there's monitoring wells everywhere. Usually, they're put on private property. So, other property owners nearby don't know that they're there.
okay.
And we don't know.
Well, we didn't know when we started on this project.
Right.
Well, the town of Chelmsford owns a big piece of property behind 3M and behind what used to be Electrometals. And that building was originally a dog food
company.
manufacturer.
Yeah.
Who knows?
By way of, having seen the DPS report and helping prepare it, the town of Chelmsford is also going to be one of the recipients of the letter, because you folks are down gradient.
Yeah.
You own property down gradient from the site, so you're going to be getting the notification, the same notification that we're submitting to everybody else.
And a note to fellow commissioners, Dave, you and I have talked about this. I think that letter under the regs go to town manager and board of health, if that's correct.
Yes.
And I think I have seen evidence of letters coming through that we didn't necessarily see.
And the letter also is going to go to the water department.
Yeah,
As
so
the owner of the property.
that's our internal matter. We need to just make sure we share info.
Good point, yeah. So, where are we here? Do you have more, David, that you want to?
I can't think of anything at the moment, but I do think the hearing needs to be continued pending, the commission receiving additional
Carl,
information.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
With the information that you've gotten already and that you're gonna get, are you gonna come up with an elevation of where the contamination starts and goes down? Like, so it'll be, assuming that the fill that was brought in there was clean over the years. Is there an elevation where it's contaminated from that level down? Is that the ground, at the
It's
water?
basically the groundwater, the high level of the groundwater and down.
So,
So the soil has been contaminated by the flow of groundwater through
right,
it.
from that level down.
Yeah.
So to be practical and to build a project on that site, is there a standard separation between whatever level the contamination's found at throughout the site, that you maintain a separation, and you build, anything you build is from that level up. So you may need to raise the building up a little bit, or maybe not, but I know you've got that one system right a little bit in the groundwater. If I'm in, what I'm saying is that, does that make sense? That you would have a separation between the groundwater, so that you're not touching any of this contamination at all?
So-
And then that cleaning up of the contamination is another issue.
Right.
That's on somebody else.
So when we talk about contaminated soil, contaminated groundwater, there's really two issues. There's what's in the environmental media, and there's also what's the exposure to the environmental media. And for PFAS, the risk of exposure and of health effects is from consumption, from drinking PFAS-impacted groundwater. So soil contact is unlikely to be a risk issue, especially at a commercial property where soil is at depth. It's not only is it, it's there, but what are the risks that it poses? And that's part of what my job involves, and Craig's too, is, we have to figure out, what are the appropriate steps to comply with the state requirements for making sure that the contamination doesn't impact receptors, people, animals, biota, to a degree which would cause an adverse health effect. And for PFAS, the risk is from consumption.
But the commission
But
also
still,
has a
so that you're not just upsetting what's there now to stay above a certain level. So you're not disturbing, it's like you're removing foundations and things out there now, right? And whatever's out there.
Right.
So we don't want to disturb what's already contaminated. So if we built above it and had a separation from the contamination up, and any of the work is from that level up, and you design your project from, does that make sense? Or is it, am I?
What you're describing makes sense.
And you're not disturbing anything.
Right.
I think Casey can provide the specifics. I mean, what is the bottom of foundation with respect to the height of groundwater?
And again, it's not the foundation, it's the footings of the frost wall. So the slab foundation is the mass of the building.
You said it was a couple feet.
So,
Right.
so our slab foundation at 122.5 have a frost wall down to about 118.5.
Right.
We're looking at groundwater elevations in the 114s, so there's, about 3 feet to 4 feet of separation. I think you were getting to the focal point system where we were digging into it.
Right.
And I think that alludes to what Ed was talking about, was that digging into it and moving it on the site, provided that it follows a soil management plan, is not going to increase exposure or increase any risk based on what is in there, so long as we're not spreading it, because the consumption is not happening based upon excavation and removing it to install a BMP.
But you're disturbing it. What if you didn't want to, what if we didn't disturb it at all? By that system, we put a different system like you had before us.
You could, but even after disturbance, the groundwater is going to flow through and do anything anyway, so.
But if you're digging into it, you're changing the way the water's gonna go, possibly. I'm just saying, stay out of that
Generally.
completely. Stay out of the contamination completely. Have a separation, whether it's, maybe it's built into what you've come up with, the 4 feet.
I understand what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't personally think the risk assessment is there to make that change based on the layout of what was necessary for us to change to the site, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just add one more thing. I just about guarantee when I meet with a contractor on site and talk about, the actual work sequence, I can just about guarantee that he's gonna tell me he's gonna have to go down further than the lowest elevation of the frost wall. I'm sure he's gonna tell me that he has to put in some kind of sub-base, before he can put in the frost wall. So, again, I think there's a non-trivial possibility that, it's gonna end up going in the ground.
Right, and that's what they need some testing, because they have to have a certain compaction for those
Right.
footings to go.
Yeah, sand by itself is not a good media to
Right.
put a building on. You're gonna have to put a better material there.
Right, so if we could jump ahead, I mean, I would hope that this commission, as in a condition, would say no excavation in groundwater, or something like that, which
Yeah.
might make it hard for you guys to build the project, if in fact David is correct. So, if, frankly, my suggestion would be for you all to have a plan for how you're gonna handle any potentially contaminated dewatering liquid, just so it's there.
Absolutely, guaranteed.
Because
that's gonna-
otherwise, you're gonna have a permit condition you can't meet.
Well, so
You're gonna have a problem building the thing, right?
I would offer, and I just spoke to Ed about this, was that Ed prepare, similar to a soil management plan, a dewatering plan in the event that that does have to happen.
Great. Good idea.
Not being a contractor myself, my understanding is that they would excavate to 118 and try 118 and a half and try not to excavate more, as that adds cost. But in the event they do need to go deeper, I'd offer a dewatering plan to address that issue.
Seems simple solution.
Right, the only thing, though, I'll add is that, you know, in the real world, that might have to be tweaked. Again, and this is nothing against engineers, but not infrequently, you know, I show contractors plans that engineers have prepared, and they say, we can't do it that way. Yes, so I think it'd be great to prepare a conceptual dewatering plan, but, you know, if it actually happens, the contractor might very well say, you know, it has to be revised or tweaked, whatever.
And you can make it a condition of the approval that whatever dewatering plan is to be agreed upon by the contractor be provided back to the Conservation
good
Commission if it needs to be revised for any reason the contractor might have.
That sounds like a great
And
solution.
I know, David, you'll have a meeting with the contractor on site, as you said, so that topic can be covered at that time as well.
Carl,
Yeah.
can I just throw one more quick thing out? Are we gonna have some public input?
Yep.
Okay, then I think
where I
I'll
was
defer.
going.
But there's sort of an open question, just for the commission, and Dave and I have looked a little bit into this. There's sort of an open question about this, now I've just forgotten the name of your stormwater system.
Focal point.
Thank you. About the effectiveness of the focal point or the suitability according to the stormwater handbook. In other words, the focal point was originally gonna be like kind of an infiltration final treatment, and now it's more like a direct, and the situation is different than what this commission approved last time around. But I think we have some public comment.
I can
maybe.
address this
Well, I
now
think
if
Casey
you'd
can
like.
address-
Or do you want to address that?
Sure, I can address this. So as you mentioned, Standard 6 for discharge to critical areas requires that any terminal treatment be verified through either what was previously Mass STEP or the TARP program.
Yes, thank you.
Neither of those programs are in existence anymore. What DEP now accepts is the TAPE standards. So that's out of Washington. This facility is verified through the TAPE standard through New Jersey DEP, as well as the New Jersey CAT, which is the Comprehensive Assessment Tool. And it's verified for everything that we propose it to do. And Mass DEP, in place of the STEP and TARP processes, now accepts the New Jersey DEP and the New Jersey CAT verification processes.
You feel our pain in trying to get our hands around all this data.
I think it's a little odd that the current standard refers back to verification processes that don't exist anymore, but yes.
And can you forward me links to those?
Absolutely.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
So, it sounds like we're going to continue this hearing. I'm fairly confident in that, but I would like to offer for the public, I know we've had a couple of letters from one of the members of the audience, and so do you want to have a moment to speak, or?
Sure, I'll just, for a sec.
Yep, okay.
Hi, I'm Ruth Luna, 10 Carter Drive. So I want to express my appreciation for all of you for the thorough job you're doing on asking questions on this, because you want to be sure that whatever is being proposed is appropriate for the location, and so I agree that, yeah, you need to know where it is on site, how deep it is. You also need to be sure that whatever is proposed for stormwater doesn't interfere with remediation efforts, so you need all that information. And I'm glad that you have an LSP here from Beta to be giving you peer review in essence on that. As far as infiltration from the the EPA document that I sent to you, that does say for infiltration, generally speaking, if the groundwater beneath the site is known to be contaminated, it is not a good idea to implement infiltration practices at the site. The movement of contaminants in groundwater is accelerated by an infiltration practice, potentially resulting in environmental impacts to neighboring properties. So that was from EPA. And then I like hearing that you want to have monitoring during the time of construction, and would ask that you would also have monitoring afterward as far as the stormwater to continue to make sure on that. On the focal point, I don't know if this is what you're referring to, Casey, as far as the, I guess I'm not supposed to address you, I'm sorry, that the applicant needs to, when it's a proprietary, that they would need to show that a BMP discharging to a critical area, that you would do the ones that are determined suitable before looking at a proprietary one. Also, that I was questioning the soil depth that they're using with the focal point, where they're proposing 18 inches. At some points, you'll see materials referencing focal point interchangeably with bioretention, and for Mass DEP for bioretention, they have a 2-foot depth for a minimum 2-foot depth for the soil. So I would like to know about that. And the total phosphorus removal, my understanding is that Mass DEP has not given focal point a specific total phosphorus removal rating. And focal point, or Convergent, who makes it, cites 60%, but then I've noticed that Rhode Island, who has approved it, only accepts 30%, and so I would want you to ask them to provide something supporting the 60% that would answer that. And then in the letter I gave you, I pointed out areas where the O&M, I think, should be amended as well. So I'm just trying to race through that. But overall, that I agree you need more information as far as construction, as far as the stormwater. You need the Beta peer review on the LSP to make sure that the remediation and what's proposed here is not going to conflict with each other, so that what you're doing is what you're hoping to achieve in the end. And so I really appreciate all your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the record, there's 2 letters that Ruth Luna has sent to us, to the commission, and I'd like to have them, I think, probably entered into the record. Does that make sense?
Sure, and I'll forward those to you.
Share them to Casey and to Craig and to Ed, Mr. Weigel.
So did you write down everything Ruth mentioned about the focal point?
Yes. So the one thing I did want to address is when DEP talks about biofiltration, usually there's an infiltration component to that, which is what requires that 2-foot separation from groundwater. Where we're wrapping the system and we're not proposing any infiltration as part of the biofiltration. We're just a filter media, so we don't require that 2-foot separation from groundwater because we don't have anything that's actually going to the groundwater.
I think she might have been referring to 2 feet of filter media, not 2 feet above groundwater.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
Did I get that right? Or?
That's correct.
So the 2 feet of filter media that typically goes along with that biofiltration is a 2-foot separation from groundwater. Sorry, I'll address the board. But so in a typical scenario with anything that infiltrates, what DEP expects is that your 80% removal is coming from 2 feet of soil that is between the bottom of your infiltration and the top of the groundwater. So in any capacity where you require infiltration and you want to take credit for removal, or you want to take removal credits for that infiltration, you need to provide 2 feet of media, which would be whatever soil you're infiltrating into is. Again, where we're not infiltrating and we're not proposing to take any credit for infiltration, that is not required for this focal point.
David, we could ask our peer reviewer to take a fresh look at that if we still have questions, I assume.
Sure.
Thanks for the explanation, it makes sense. Not questioning what you're saying.
Yeah, so and I think I would like responses in writing to the point
Yep.
Ruth makes.
If you forward letters to me, I can provide basically a response to comments, and if when we get any peer review back from any LSP stuff, we can provide the same.
Okay, I'll forward those to you as well, Craig.
So I think where we're at right now is we have a number of outstanding issues. We're looking for information. I think we talked about the soil sampling results, the soil management plan, the dewatering plan, having our peer reviewer to review those, along with the letter questions from Mrs. Luna. What else am I missing that we?
Well, I recommend just getting as much information as is available, you know, again, on the history of contamination on this site.
I'd like to see the water department get more involved in this right now.
Well, they certainly are aware of it. Andy is on vacation this
Right.
week. But I'll,
How about
touch
the
base.
dewatering plan? You gonna,
I said that,
they're
yeah.
gonna-
You did that?
they're
Okay,
They're gonna
so
have a
sorry.
dewatering
Yep.
plan.
I tuned you out, I guess.
It's all right, Bill.
Is it activated carbon that cleans the water?
In the media?
Yeah.
So actually, after he asked, at the last meeting, I dug in myself to figure out exactly how the media cleans it. But yes, it is just chemical reactions within the filter media that basically separate out the total phosphorus, which then gets kind of attached to a portion of the media. And then over time, the plants that are growing within the focal point basically metabolize all the captured nutrients to get rid of them out of the media. So it's basically just a series of chemical reactions that take out the pollutants.
So,
What would you release the groundwater at after it's been filtered? You couldn't get to zero. I think the lowest you can get is four parts per billion.
Well, so our treatment rates, specifically for this treatment train, the focal point is rated for 80% total suspended solids, so which is the requirement from SDEP. So in theory, you'd be releasing it at 20% because you removed 80%. We have provided further treatment ahead of it. We just didn't take any credit for it because we didn't need it to meet requirements. But then in the phosphorus case, the focal point is rated for 60%, so we'd be releasing it at 40% as required by the local bylaw of stormwater.
So was it those programs that rated the 60%?
As far to my knowledge, and I'll get those from Convergent Waters, ACF Ferguson to get it back to you.
But there's an important point, Mark. You started to talk about parts per trillion, or
Right,
are you talking PFAS or phosphorus or?
PFAS.
Oh, PFAS is not treated by this, but also PFAS is not. PFAS is in the groundwater, so it's not going through any of our systems.
Right.
Either.
But if you dewater,
Right, so that'll be part of the dewatering plan. That focal point will not accept any of the dewatered because it won't be in use at that time.
Yeah, Mark, my understanding, and I'll defer to our LSPs who know more about this than I, but my understanding is if you do have PFAS contaminated groundwater, you've got maybe three primary options. You can treat it with a carbon system on site and then discharge it, or you can infiltrate it back into the groundwater, although I'm not quite sure what those rules are, or you can ship it off site. But for PFAS during construction, there's very specific ways that it's handled to keep it out of the wetland.
That's gonna be in the.
And that'll be addressed in the dewatering plan should we encounter any.
I was just
groundwater.
inquiring about the account that would be, what the water be released at when it does, if they treat it on site and release it.
Right, that's the question.
Right.
For the dewatering plan. I mean, if the treatment process runs right, that's fine, it's not a problem.
No, correct. Right.
That's the question of construction monitoring and oversight and whatever.
I mean, and then, Carl, kind of comes back to my concern, biggest concern, monitoring during construction and afterwards, really understanding where those monitoring wells are gonna be located, where they make the most sense to be, and then the plan for follow-up to make sure the data's collected and evaluated.
Well, I think that monitoring of the discharge from the flared end sections should be required.
Yep.
What's actually coming out of those pipes into the wetland.
Yep.
Post-construction you're talking
Yeah,
about.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the O and M plan, all of that, how that's gonna work.
Related to PFAS?
I would say that and the previous contaminants as well. I mean, you've heard.
Previous contaminants in groundwater?
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, you've heard the concern that, even though the focal point actually won't, that filtration won't have any contact with the groundwater, it, when it's installed and operate, it could have disrupted the hydrogeology with respect to the contaminants that,
But I think
I don't think I don't see a way that any groundwater is going to enter any of the pipes that leave the flared end sections.
Right, but David, you were saying monitoring wells for groundwater to see if the stormwater system and the building changed the groundwater discharge patterns. And then there's a second question on stormwater quality, where I think what Casey is saying makes sense to me, that it's not intercepting groundwater. But
Right.
yeah,
you have some questions, so maybe we can work that through.
yeah, let's,
Okay.
Okay,
let's talk
so,
about that.
so it sounds like we're continuing to the next meeting. Do we think we can get all this information to us, to the beta reviewer?
I think most of the information that you're requesting would be coming from Ed, so what do you think for timing?
I think probably, based on, what's been said tonight, we'll take our soil management plan and we'll revise it to include a section for groundwater management if needed, and how we would go about managing groundwater during construction.
When's the next scheduled meeting?
August 8th?
8th, so we'd like to have stuff, if it's gonna get peer reviewed. That's only 2
Yep.
weeks from now anyway, right?
August 22nd
just
is one
so-
after that.
I'm going to actually be on vacation, but I can find somebody internally to kind of assist on that front for when I'm not.
Well, I guess in any case, we could target would you say the 8th? And if needed, we could just continue prior to that meeting. I guess I'd like to target the 8th.
Okay.
And if needed,
That's
Move
fine.
we
Cross the bridge.
continue the hearing on 270 Bill Ricker Road until August 8th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So I think we talked through everything that needs to be delivered to us in the meantime, and then we can just review all that at the next meeting,
absolutely.
or the one after that if it's not quite ready, but that's the plan.
All right.
Craig, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
And to both of you, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Okay, let's move on. On our agenda, everybody take a deep breath. Stand up, no, exercise. Okay, next on the agenda is a request for certificate of compliance at 129-0923. David, can you,
Yes,
you told me yesterday and I'm forgetting what this is.
yes.
Could you put the street address on it next time?
Well, it's actually the main transmission
Oh,
line.
that's right.
So,
Oh, it is.
I'll just give a little bit of background first on that project, and Allison, you can chime in if I say anything wrong, or, you feel you need to add comments to it. So that was a project for, I think it was along the entire length of the main transmission line. I don't recall off the top of my head its numerical designation, but people.
And went through Chelmsford.
Right. And so that was to do soil borings. I think it's primarily to do soil borings for future modifications of the transmission towers. Is that an accurate description, Allison?
Yes, correct. So they need to take soil borings at certain locations, mostly dead ends and angle structures. So it wasn't every structure along the right of way, but that's correct.
Okay. So the commission issued an order of conditions for that work, which now has been completed. Received a request for a certificate of compliance on that. My feeling on this is that, and the commission is well aware that typically the way the process works, the procedure works when a request for a COC is submitted, and preliminary to issuing the COC, a site inspection is done to verify compliance. In this particular case, given the large geographic extent, yeah, I mean, it would take, you know, a long time. I'm not sure it's an efficient use of my time to begin with, to look essentially to verify that the site has been stabilized, and don't know whether there might be any other concerns. A lot of this work was in rare species habitat. So my recommendation to the commission is that the commission hire a third-party consultant to review the project site, you know, walk or travel the length of the easement to verify compliance, which I think the commission does have the legal right to do under at least the bylaw. The other I think alternative, which I think the applicant wants to take advantage of, is just based on, you know, their representative's certification that the work has been completed in compliance with the order of conditions.
Is there a report that they provided on this, that they're?
Well, a short one. I can bring that up. Just you know, a written narrative that was submitted with the request for their certificate of compliance. Hold on a second.
Do you know where this is?
No.
Got a mountain bike and go ride it? Get our motorized vehicle, in that
Motorized, yeah.
endangered species
There you go.
habitat. Will David a heart attack.
Yeah.
Carl, you got a mountain bike?
No, used to.
Is your computer big enough?
Okay. So,
I think down at the bottom. No, down under the, right there.
yeah,
right in-
okay, sorry.
Somewhere in there.
It's different with every application.
There we go.
Okay.
So BSC did this, okay.
Right.
We've dealt with those guys before, right, with BSC.
So I guess probably the second paragraph is sort of the operative one. At this time, ground disturbing activities are complete and disturbed areas have been permanently stabilized. It's basically that one sentence, you know. Again, I think it should be verified by the commission's agent. You know,
So this is in the transmission line, roughly where in the town is this? Do we
Well,
know?
The key question is this off of River Neck Road on conservation land?
No, that's a distribution line.
Okay.
We're talking about the transmission line, which,
This one goes through Mark's backyard, right?
No, that's power.
129
Is that a transmission line?
down across Boston Road, Turnpike
We
Road.
talked.
Allison, are you able to give us a little?
I can bring up the project plans.
It does cross Boston Road, that's correct.
Concord Road,
Boston
Old
Road? Okay,
Stage.
so it's in John's neighborhood.
Yeah,
Yeah, it goes through the whole town.
yeah, good, just goes
Up.
out of Tewksbury, right?
Up over.
Is there any, like,
Turnpike Road.
Right, so-
Meadows.
photography or drone coverage, just kind of a
So what would
scan
it
of
take, what would it take to have a consultant or someone to go out and verify this? What kind of capability, or what's who would do that?
Well,
Excuse me, may I please present at least or be part of this conversation?
Sure?
This is Allison Millman. I'm with BSC Group. I'm
Oh.
representative on the behalf of New England Power Company. I'd like to just provide some background. New England Power Company is requesting relief from peer review for the 337 K137E, L138E soil boring certificate of compliance. New England Power retained BSC Group to complete weekly and post-construction restoration inspections for this project. BSC walked the entire site associated with the soil boring activities and provided photo documentation of the restoration of the right-of-way in areas subject to the Commission's review. Per special condition number 30 in our order of conditions states, upon the completion of all exploratory borings, a final written report shall be submitted to the conservation agent, which includes representative photos showing the condition of all access routes and bore sites in jurisdictional areas, and a description of any restoration remediation activities conducted. The applicant's position is that requiring a peer review to duplicate efforts associated with the restoration review provided by BSC is excessive, considering the scope of work, which included temporary soil borings and temporary construction matting and wetlands. Per a comment from David, soil borings are explicitly exempt from the MESA regulations, and we did receive a concurrence letter from Natural Heritage when we submitted our notice of intent. Finally, we're happy to conduct a site review with David should this be requested, but we do not see the need for a third party or a peer review for restoration associated with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you have the documentation, the pictures, and all
I
of
don't
that?
think I got that report, Allison.
You received a request for a certificate of compliance with photo documentation, correct, sir?
But that's.
I can share my screen. I have that here.
Okay.
Well, resend it.
But let me just verify. So that was. Okay. Yes, there are photos there.
So here's what I'd like to do, if this makes sense. I'd like to take a look at that, have the commission look at that report, if you can share that with us.
Okay.
Allison, this is the report
What,
you're talking about, right? Yeah?
The one-page report?
No, this. What he's,
Section.
Well, it's the one page plus the pictures. That's
Yeah.
really what it is.
Is there any?
that's what you're talking about, right, Allison?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we can take a look at that, then at the next meeting, I
Maybe
think.
you haven't looked at it yet. You just see it, it's just on.
Well, I
Yeah.
I
I
haven't
think you
really
thought it was
I
just
haven't
the
really
one
looked
page.
at the photos.
Yeah. Yes, okay.
You know,
Allison, a quick question. You probably know this off the top of your head. What's the total length of this project in miles? Or just rough? I mean, is it
Within Chelmsford.
is it the whole town?
Yeah.
Well, no.
It started on one
I think-
side of the town and
Well, I think it
crossed
goes
over
across
to
other
the
towns,
other.
too.
No, I got it. Okay,
Carlisle to
I got it.
Pittsburgh.
Thank you. I got it.
Right, but I mean, to be clear, the soil borings were at distinct locations. You know, not every single structure required a soil boring.
Yeah.
They were just at the dead ends and angle structures, so it's not the entire length of right-of-way that was impacted. And again, the impacts were temporary in nature
Yep.
and much akin to that which is exempt from the Wetlands Protection Act for utility maintenance.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
assume
I'm
that,
just going to jump in. Sorry, this is Andrew Cole, the lead environmental scientist for National Grid. To Allison's point, I mean, it's de minimis activity with very minimal impacts, and BMPs were implemented throughout, obviously with what Allison said, inspections conducted throughout, so that was in part the request for relief of this additional peer review.
Okay. I'm sorry, I missed your name. Can you repeat it?
My name's Andrew Cole, the lead environmental scientist from National Grid.
Okay, so I think that all looks good, but I would like to take a look at this and not sign off on it tonight.
Can I make 3 points?
Yep.
What was, Allison, you referenced some communication with Natural Heritage? Could you share what they said?
Oh, yes, and that was submitted, all the letters when we do when we file our notice of intent, we always send a copy to Natural Heritage when work is happening within priority or estimated habitat. While we provide that information, soil borings or exploratory geotechnical investigations are explicitly exempt in the MESA regulations. So the letter reflected that concurrence with our findings, and it was provided to the Chelmsford Conservation Commission.
And that's all they
Um,
talked about with the soil borings?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. They didn't say anything about disturbing the land while you got to the place where you were gonna make the soil boring?
That's correct. I
Okay.
mean, there's really
That's all
no,
right.
there's
That's
really
all
no
right.
disturbance.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second point is, we have dealt with BSC in the past, and they're pretty good.
They're excellent.
We've, I don't know in what.
They're excellent.
I don't know what capacity we've used.
It's
them.
been multiple, over the years, absolutely.
And the third point I want to make is for the National Grid person who is on the TV. We have had a terrible experience with National Grid tearing up the woodlands, particularly where we had, in one case, we'll get to it later when you want it, off of River Neck Road, where we have a wood turtle habitat, which is an endangered species. We told National Grid about it, they didn't listen to us, and they destroyed that property. That basis alone is enough for me to deny a CFC and see what happens. But let's wait till we get the other information. I'm really upset at the job, not this job, because we don't, but the job you guys did out off of River Neck Road on conservation land.
And it was partly with that in mind that I'm making my recommendation that an independent peer reviewer take a look at this.
I think,
David, separate from this project, can the particular separate project be brought to my attention? Is this one that you and I
Come
discussed?
off
or-
of it.
Andrew, I expressed to you my concerns about what happened off of River Neck Road. You can go back and review my emails. I don't feel I really got what I feel was a good response from you on that.
Excuse me, sir, this is not Washington. I'm just giving you my opinion about dealing with your company on a specific site on conservation land. And I will always say what I want to say, whether it's on the agenda or not.
okay,
That's not what I was implying. I was just trying to ensure
It was
that I
to me.
Okay.
okay. So, I still think,
Yeah.
at a minimum, let's
Yeah.
be able to review this. We'll, at the next meeting, let's decide if we want to have a peer review. Does
Can
that
we
make
easily
sense?
tell where each of those pictures are? Or I can't, is there a?
How many pictures do we have here?
About 8 or 9, I would guess. Maybe a dozen?
Like more.
Is there a
Yeah.
title? I can't see. Is there a title under each picture?
Well, it identifies like photo 1, view of restored access proximate to structure
So we don't
110.
really-
It looks like it identifies as a structure ID.
Right, which coincides with the mapping provided with our notice of intent.
And I,
We'll be
And it
able to
provides
figure it out.
direction of view.
So we can
That's correct.
figure out where they are.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, yeah,
Perfect.
good.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Does that make sense? You'll be
Yeah,
able to
sure.
share that
Yeah.
with the commission, and we'll review it at the next meeting. Okay? This isn't a hearing, so
No.
we don't have to take a vote on that unless I hear otherwise, unless somebody's
No,
in
I
disagreement.
agree.
Okay.
okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Move
Thank
on.
you all for your
Take your
time. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Okay, some more fun here. Let's talk about, this is 221 Littleton Road. This is the ratification of the enforcement order. This is the
Yes.
famous oil trucks.
Yes. So let me
former
bring up the
Hair
draft.
salon building. That's
Well,
right.
maybe it's hair dye and oil trucks.
Insurance is very
And
toxic.
insurance.
Yeah, it is. Do we know who to send it to? Yeah.
Well, it's the
That's another problem.
Yeah,
property owner of record.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a-
as
it's
the
a
lawyer is.
trustee.
We're all full of shit.
Right, right.
I mean, that's understood,
We
right?
had a good, yeah, we've had a good rapport with that company before, the BCR.
I know their CEO personally.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, they're not bad, but they're paid for it. It's like built-in conflict of
Yeah.
interest.
Right, right.
All consultants.
Okay,
proposals,
so
they
this
know how
is,
to get
Dave, you want to read it through?
Sure, so extent
So they're
and
a
type of
box.
activity, parking of oil delivery trucks and similar vehicles. The activity is being conducted in an area subject to protection under chapter 131, section 40, or the buffer zone. I'll add the bylaw in there as well, without approval from the issuing authority. And so that's the activity.
The activity is the parking of the oil trucks.
Yes. The property owner, his agents, permittees, and all others shall immediately cease and desist from any activity affecting the buffer zone and/or resource areas. Immediately remove all oil delivery trucks and similar vehicles from the 100-foot buffer zone. And then file a request for determination of applicability or notice of intent for parking of oil delivery trucks and similar vehicles. I didn't put a date in there because, you know.
Well, when you say immediately, is that a reasonable time, like 48 hours, or?
Well, yeah, they can just drive the trucks.
Well, I know, but when you say immediately, you don't mean him to stop everything he's doing and rush out there and move them.
Well, let's
So
put a
he's got
number-
some reasonable time to do it.
Can we put a number in?
I don't
A
know.
week or something, or
I mean,
whatever?
The terminology David's using is pretty standard terminology.
Right, it is. So, I mean, immediately can have a certain range of
What do you think,
interpretation.
Counselor? What's immediate mean?
Well, I like immediate, but we could say, but no longer than, and fill in a date, you know, if you want.
See, the thing is, I think if it says immediately and it takes him 2 weeks to do it, whereas if you give him 2 weeks to do it, it'll take 4 weeks to
That's
do it.
right, that's true.
Yeah.
So,
I'm fine with immediate.
I'm good with immediately.
Just tell him not
And
to
this
hold
would
his
go to,
breath.
this would go to them with certified
Yes.
delivery, and it would be there within a day or two
Yes.
from now.
And do we know where there is?
Well, the lawyer is in Littleton.
Okay.
Well, I'm
good.
not sending it to her. I'm
Yeah.
sending it, I mean, the address of the owner is given as 221
Okay, okay.
Littleton Road.
Do they make deliveries? They must make
Okay.
deliveries.
You probably should give a copy to the lawyer, you know.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Do you make any note of anything about, you know, we have endeavored to contact you over and over and over, and there's no reply? or-
He's well aware of that.
Okay.
That is right,
Good enough.
spot on.
Good enough, do it.
You have the corporation, but you don't know who the principals are.
Well, it does give a trustee, so I'm gonna add his name.
And that's probably a lawyer.
Okay.
Well, so I move that we ratify this enforcement order.
Second.
Moved by Chris, second by Dave, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, none, so it passes, and thank you very much, David, for
I
doing
think
this.
it's
This
a
is-
legitimate concern.
Yeah, totally.
And Godspeed.
Very frustrating. Very frustrating. that this is
Question?
not-
We
There's one
talked
down
about,
with two to go.
all right, I'll be quiet.
No, I didn't mean that. We haven't,
Yeah,
I'm
so
waiting for 2 more enforcement orders, but not tonight. Yes.
our hit list of enforcement.
So on 0 Littleton Road, so I think I mentioned last time that the owner was in the process of hiring a new surveyor. Interestingly.
Any update on Pat?
Yeah.
Yes, he actually did show up in the office.
I saw him.
He looked very healthy.
Good.
And
Good.
so I asked him,
So
well,
maybe
what's,
he wasn't sick, but still, it's good he looks
No, he
better.
well,
was. He was.
I didn't hear that.
yeah, and what he said was that actually, he said the owner wanted him to do it right away, and he said he just couldn't do it right away. I don't know, it may,
He had backlog.
well, I think that's the case with all surveyors, but I did request that the owner let me know once he has a new surveyor on board. I haven't heard from him since that request, so.
Probably a name we know well, I don't know, you know. Why is it 0 Littleton Road?
Because it's a vacant lot.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's
Not
0?
developed.
So are all vacant lots 0?
Yeah,
Littleton
yeah,
Road?
yeah, like.
It just seems that when somebody doesn't want to do anything, they say, I have to get another engineer, I have to get another
Right.
Buy
surveyor.
some time, right, absolutely.
Yeah, although, let's say Pat did corroborate the story that the owner wanted him to do it right away, and he said he just couldn't get to it right away, so he told him.
He doesn't know what he's
Okay.
missing.
All
That
right.
would do a good job for him.
Let's keep moving,
So on 35 Brick Hill Road, I actually was given permission to visit the property, to
great.
assess progress, and they have made quite a bit of progress on, getting the stuff, the fill and junk/debris out of the wetlands. There's still a little ways to go. I did emphasize to them that they needed to hire a wetland scientist ASAP. She said she would do that. I was intending to get a status report from them either yesterday or today. I just got too tied up with other matters and wasn't able to get out that email, but I'll do that tomorrow, and hopefully have at least hired.
So David, if I remember this discussion, tree cutting was a big deal, that the neighbors were saying there were a lot of trees cut in the wetland. Is that what your observation was?
There was some disturbance in the wetland. The wetlands were more shrubs than trees. I think most of the trees cut were in the buffer zone.
There was on-site
Which is still
burning, too.
in our jurisdiction, though.
There was on-site burning
Yes.
too, I think.
Yeah, although they did have a permit from the fire department on that. They understand that the wetland scientist needs to prepare a restoration plan
Okay,
for what was disturbed.
I'd be surprised
okay,
at that.
okay,
So
Good.
I'll keep pestering them.
okay.
201, 203 Boston Road, I was expecting the NOI filing yesterday. Didn't come in. So,
They're Mark's buddies. We'll let Mark take care of it.
well,
that's
kind
another
of my
one.
word is on the line at this point.
That's another one that there were a lot of trees cut on that site, as I remember.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
Oh, years ago.
Well, apparently if you look at the aerials, there was more work was
Last
done
year or
out
two.
there than.
Behind the
I-
house?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, apparently that was quite, if you look at the aerials, that was quite forested.
I counted 30 trees and big shrubs
Really?
on the old aerial, which I didn't have a date on it. Google
So-
Maps.
So they removed all the stumps because the stumps weren't there. So I've been under the impression that it was just still, basically an open field,
That's what I thought.
but apparently not.
No?
That wasn't the case.
Okay,
Well,
so.
more up around the house, in the garage that was there. There was a bunch of fir trees and stuff.
Yeah,
Can
there
we
was
get,
some-
can
there
we
was some
get an
maples
update,
and-
though,
Yeah.
from the engineer?
Yes, yeah, I'll contact him.
Yeah, we really need to hear from him by
Yeah.
the next meeting. Okay. IMA well? Exploration?
So we did hear back from Natural Heritage. They are requiring the water department to do a formal filing under MISA
Oh, well.
for that. So their consultant, AECom, is, I guess, has experience in doing this and is preparing the filing for submission
David,
to
how
MISA.
broad an area would that cover? Just where they want to put the test well?
Yeah, I think it was about 12 acres.
But it would be valuable historical information
Yeah, it's in the
when we
water
get to
department
see
still?
the, perhaps, see
Isn't that a
the plans for
contradiction?
the apartment house,
Coming back
and
to
if
it, has to be
if Davis ever comes
Somebody's
back.
not
Right,
telling the truth,
right.
maybe.
Yeah, now which apartment house?
We have
Yeah,
one meeting.
oh, the condos down across, where the yellow house is with the big red X on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what's happening with that.
Well, nobody does, but they're supposedly coming back with condos or apartments or
Well, we'll
something.
see.
Okay, so, is there any, we'll get another update at some point on this, or?
On yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way I left it was he's on vacation, is that I made one more tweak to the agreement, pertaining to the rare species, so he's gonna present that to the meeting of the water commissioners. I think he said they're meeting August 16th. They'll sign it, then I'll bring it back to you, Carl. Have
Okay.
you sign it, since the commission's already voted, sign it, and then town council signs it as well.
Oh, okay, all right.
Can I just make an observation? We just talked to National Grid and their associates, and they said that Natural Heritage wasn't concerned with drilling wells. That was not one of their concerns, but now they're concerned with the water department drilling wells.
Yeah, because the water department doesn't have an exemption for what they want to do, which doesn't seem logical in some ways. Because, water is.
Every time you turn around, National Grid has an exemption.
Okay.
They do. They do have
Yeah.
a lot of exemptions. And sometimes well.
No, I understand. I don't understand, but I know what you mean.
But that's a good point, Mark. I think, you
Yeah.
know, I think I want to verify that. Yeah. Why is there a
I
difference?
mean, water utility versus electric
It's a
utility.
little
So-
discordant.
Right.
So can we adopt a bylaw to address these kinds of gaps that we see all over the regs? Not just this one, but in
It's
general?
not our jurisdiction to adopt regulations for that, is it? Is it
Sure
up
it
to
is.
Sure it is.
Sure it is.
Natural Heritage to do it?
Sure it is.
Oh, we can do it, I think. Dave?
Well, it's, I think it's a little bit tricky to make something that is, I mean, certainly the wetland bylaw is more stringent than the
Right.
Wetlands Protection Act, but I gather in general, it's tricky to do that. Like the commission can't, with the Forest Cutting Practices Act, you know, the town can't pass a bylaw to make that more stricter than the state Forest Cutting Practices Act. Like you can't, the town can't pass a bylaw to require, say, a notice of intent filing when someone wants to log their property. So that might apply to rare species as well. I think ultimately it's a question for town council.
Okay, table that.
Okay, next on the list, update on the Warren Pole Reservation.
I have no new news
No news.
on the sign.
Okay. We are still working on the CR. I did get a reply back from Dale. I need to connect with him on the mosquito part of that.
You know, Carl, I think we're at a point where we should let the commission see what we
Yeah.
want. Because the major CR is there, whether the mosquito thing is an issue or not.
And the other issues of the easements, which
Yeah.
those will get resolved.
Right.
So, yeah, why don't we do that?
Because
Get it-
it's, unfortunately, guys, it's what, 8 pages?
Yeah, it's not that many.
And if you don't read the legalese, it's
Yeah.
probably 2.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe what we'll do is do that, because we'd like to get to the point where we can get this in front of the select board and get that approved.
Carl?
We do have to resolve this, though, with the land trust. And in addition, I've had the conversation with Dale about the requirement to have the site reviewed on an annual basis, and we weren't quite aligned on what that looked like. And my expectation was that it would be stricter than what Dale was expecting, so we'll see what that looks like. That's part of the conversation we need to have.
We want a memorandum of understanding that says the land trust will do XYZ once a year or twice a year, and report to us report to us whether or not the terms of the CR are being followed by us, because effectively, it's our land.
Yeah.
But it's work.
So I want to just mention that a little bit, that in addition to that site, Dale made a good point, that if we know that there's an encroachment or a violation, like leaves being thrown, then we need to do something about it
Sure.
and not wait for them
No,
to
that's true.
review that.
That's
And I
right.
totally
I agree.
agree with
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
And in fact, you know, we see that in some of our other properties. We have this property on River Neck Road that we're looking at having it turned into a conservation reservation. It turns out that property had a building on it for who knows how long that wasn't our building. We knew nothing about it. They've since removed it. The land trust had it removed by the neighboring owner. So I guess my point is that as we get into doing site visits, you know, we've been focused on reservations, that maybe we should be looking at some of our other non-reservation properties that we don't get to very often, and go, hey, you know, that site there, like Melody Lane, our first agenda item tonight. If we had gone and visited that, we might have been standing there going, hey, what's all this? You know, and turn around and talk to Ken Dews, you know, that might have, you know, headed that kind of a thing off. So anyway, I think it's worth it for us to think about that with some of our other sites. These are our sites. If they're being infringed on, or encroached or anything, we should be a little more proactive on that, so.
I think I've been on conservation, I don't know, about 12, 15 years now. I've never seen conservation as diligent as they are now. They've never come this close. just things always slid by, things that are coming up. I mean, David's taken the reins and all of this stuff. I give him all the credit in the world for it, but that never happened before. Never, not even close.
Yeah.
And I find as the new guy still that the amount of detail, though, to your point, is tremendous. And, I mean, I don't know how you remember it all, but
Devil's in the
there's a
detail.
lot going on. There's a lot going on.
Yep.
If you really lift up the rug and think about it.
You're not getting a raise, so forget about that.
You're not either.
So, so the other thing I wanted to mention, Crooked Spring, we cleared a lot of, there's Japanese knotweed at the Graniteville end of that site like crazy, and we cleared a lot of that a couple of weeks ago. In the meantime, we've had a lot of rain, and I went out this afternoon, I had my muck boots on to go clear some of the water, and I realized right near the walkway at the Graniteville end, if you know that walkway that goes across over towards Castlewood, coming from the sewer line. It's a raised walkway, bridge, whatever, over the brook and then over the wetland. There's a beaver dam right there.
Really?
Right there, and the water is right up to the bridge, to the walkway, and I'm like, wow. Oh, I thought I was just gonna go clear some brush from the big storm, and it's like, oh, nope, that's not, this is a lot more here than I thought, and it's kind of hidden in the brush, but when you start looking, it's like, wow, okay, Mr. Beaver's been really busy there, so, I think the long-term solution there is to build a much higher bridge. This is not simple, this is serious money and serious structure that clears the whole wetland and goes from dry land to dry land instead of, with some posts in the middle. But, you're talking like a, $50,000 structure or something like that. I don't
why
know.
not?
But
Where
right now.
where is this, Carl? Up at Graniteville?
Right at the
Granville
Graniteville.
Road?
Yeah, and right now, it's impassable. You can't walk
And
across
where
it.
is, and the beaver dam is on our side or on the other side?
It's on our property, and it's.
So it's backing up.
Yeah, it's very close to the Graniteville Road. It's
Yeah.
within 30 feet of Graniteville Road.
When we were out there for
50
that
feet.
site walk, we saw that really big
Yeah.
beaver dam when we were out that day.
And I walk it a lot, and I noticed the beaver has not been there. I haven't seen him there in quite a while. It turns out he's been upstream in the brush, hidden in that area.
It's
And
not son of the beaver?
I don't know what it is, but it's like, wow, okay. It's really high, and it's pretty effective. So,
And it's not threatening any private properties.
no, long way from
There's a
that.
couple of culverts that go under Grandview rather.
Graniteville.
Graniteville, that go under Graniteville. I don't know what's on the other side. There's probably a
It's
couple.
uphill. It's all coming
It's
downhill.
coming
so-
down fast, right?
Yeah. So anyway, it's, it's an interesting situation, and I'm not quite, we're gonna have to put a sign up saying the bridge is out, and try to do that tomorrow or something. Okay. Last thing here, certificate of compliance on 10 Tracy Road. David, you have that for us to
Yes,
sign?
yeah, no, I recommend approval of that.
And I'm sorry, do you have anything else on agents report?
No.
Okay. And I don't think we got meeting minutes, did we?
No.
Vivian, for July 11th? Okay. So if we want to sign,
Is Tracy Road the town?
No, that was a cell tower on one of those companies' property up there.
I'm sorry, did you say we don't have that to sign, or we?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, you
So
want to
just
send
need
it
a
around?
motion.
I move we issue a certificate of compliance on 10 Tracy Road.
Second.
All approved? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Take a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you to our audience for your participation tonight.
Peter, this is 2004 from Boston Road?
And contribution.
This is
Triangle
2000
Service Station.
This is 203 here. This is 203 Boston Road. So on
It's Harvey's
this is
house right there.
Right, but what date is this picture?
2004,
Fourth?
20, 30 years ago?
Says a possible those trees
Right.
grew up in the last 20 years, right?
I don't know, but that's the,
Yeah,
how
I
far
went-
back did you go?
I just went, I don't have a date. I just went to Google Earth.
There you go.
Went to Google
They're
Earth.
back here. Now, if you go to,
So that's what you're saying, John, is that there wasn't much there.
if
There
you,
wasn't.
if you go to 2019, it's the same picture.